Hello and welcome to the July 18th edition of the Patreon Party People podcast. I am, of course, as always, your host, Ryan Bloom, and this podcast is especially late. Like, we've been having some pretty late podcasts as of late, but I feel like this is probably the latest it's ever been. Obviously, if you're listening to this on YouTube, it is free this month. Normally, podcasts are on a 1-month delay to, encourage people to subscribe to my Patreon if they want to hear the latest podcast. Because, let's be honest, lately, that's more or less all I've really had to offer you guys is a podcast for people who pay on Patreon. That and, thanks at the end of a video. But, there's other Patreons that's literally, they don't even offer that much. So, maybe I'm doing good, maybe I'm doing bad, but regardless, I feel like that's something I had to state because there was somebody with the June podcast that seemed a little confused as to why all this exists the way it does. But anyway, we're starting off with a tangent again. What I was trying to say, this month is free. It's, my birthday is July 6th, and usually for my birthday, I make the podcast free for everyone because that's just how I roll. It's just a weird thing that I do. So this month, there's no delay. I guess that, that kind of makes it good that this podcast was so late because, people on YouTube won't be getting a podcast in August. They'll get August's podcast in September. So, having this in the middle of July probably isn't the worst thing in the world. But the main reason why it is so late is because I didn't want to put a podcast out until I was done with the video review. I did not want to take the 2 or 3 hours it takes me to gather all my notes together and record a podcast to actually put the video review on hold because, I'd built up a nice momentum, let's say. And I didn't want to interrupt that momentum by, going through the trouble, like I said earlier, gathering the notes. Usually it takes me about an hour or two to, figure out exactly point by point what I want to go through in a given episode of the podcast. And then usually it takes me, we'll say, an hour, 45 minutes to actually record the podcast. And then on top of that, if I'm posting a video to YouTube, there's a template I have for Sony Vegas where I slot the MP3 in, and then that usually takes like an hour to render, and then, 20 to 30 minutes to upload, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. So we're looking at to produce a podcast for YouTube. We're talking like a 4-hour, 5-hour commitment at the very least. So, I didn't want to pull the brakes on the choo-choo train that was my gosh, what is the word I'm looking for? Momentum, I guess? I don't know. That's not really I don't know. There's a word there that I'm looking for that I definitely cannot think of. But yeah, it was my birthday this month. July 6th. I am now 35 years old. Those of you who saw the Sonic Mania video review might know that there's a segment in there where I say I'm about to be 35. That's because I wrote that segment months ago, and I recorded that segment like 4 weeks ago. So, it was a little bit out of date, and I didn't feel like re-recording that specific part because I'd have to redraw the artwork, and oh boy, it's one big traffic jam, my life these days. But I had an okay birthday, I guess. As you get older, you tend to, birthdays get less and less extravagant, let's say, and that's just part of growing up, So I ended up getting a really nice set of Prisma colored pencils from my mom. Those of you out there in the art world will know that Prisma is the high watermark for colored pencils. A pack of, 12 colored pencils is usually $10 or $15. These are expensive colored pencils. And she got me, it's this metal tin. Here, hang on, actually, I can go get it. It's 2 feet away. Give me a sec. Yeah, it's a pack of 72 Prismacolor colored pencils. And if you go into like a hobby store or like a craft store like Michael's or whatever, a box of these colored pencils is like, we're talking $60 to $80 or more. She apparently picked this up on, gosh, I don't even know where. It might have been eBay. Brand new, never opened, never used. I think she said she paid like $20 for it. So that's a steal. And I now have very, very nice colored pencils. They're all official and everything. I know sometimes you get stuff on eBay. It might be a little, it's not on the up and up, but you know, to my eyes, these look like real Prismacolor colored pencils, and it is a very big set. Whoa, that's probably not a very good thing to pick up on the microphone. That was me opening and closing the tin they come in. But for those of you who know, like when I've done colored pencil pictures in the past, they've been just like with a standard 52 set of Crayola colored pencils. And those, those have served me just fine. Those Crayola colored pencils, they can do some stuff if you know how to use them well enough. And I would stretch them as far as I could. And now I have like the real deal, and I really need to get on to like trying them out and drawing a picture. Something I want to do with them is like sketch out a picture, ink it, scan it in, print it out, and then color it once with the old Crayola colored pencils I have, and then color it again with the Prismacolor colored pencils, and see if I can notice a difference or anything like that. That'll be an art project for the future here in a moment or two. My cousin also ended up gifting me a copy of PUBG, PlayerUnknown's Battlegrounds, which I'm definitely eager to play more of. I played a little bit of that on my birthday with him and his wife. That was a fun time. It's a little bit weird as someone who has played 2 or 3 hours of Fortnite at this point, to go back to what would be considered the originator of the Battle Royale format, and how different that game is, even though it's one of those things where, like, I know the basics of PUBG, but I don't know the nuance of PUBG, and my knowledge of Fortnite throws me off quite a bit. So that's something that's going to be a learning process. He threatened to be on the podcast next month because he wants to talk PUBG with me, sort of like how Setsune threatened to be on the podcast to talk at me about Sonic Forces. So, maybe next month we'll have a special guest. Maybe we won't. I don't know. Like, scheduling is weird, That's the podcast with Setsune. Like, we ended up delaying that like 2.5, 3 weeks because we just couldn't ever nail down a schedule and pick a night to talk into a microphone. So, we'll see what happens. I'm pretty sure he might be on next month, but that's not 100% guarantee. Then a friend also gifted me the Talos Principle, which I booted up once and played for like 4 hours one day. Like, that was my allotted day off from the video review, was playing 4 hours of the Talos Principle. And that's a pretty good game. It's by Crow Team, the guys who did Serious Sam. And it is completely different from their wheelhouse. It's this sort of almost like art game in a way, but it's also like got puzzle game elements to it, sort of like The Witness. You play as like an artificial intelligence robot, and like they don't outright state it, but you kind of pick up on clues that it's millions of years in the future. Like, humanity is long dead from some, like, great cataclysm they won't, like, actually talk about. They don't say what's happening. They just talk about, the world's coming to an end, and here's this research we're doing on artificial intelligence, and we've got this massive database of information of all recorded human history for the robot to learn. And then, oh no, the database becomes corrupted, and what happens when not all the information is there? Sorry, I'm picking up my water. And I was tweeting about this a little bit in the context of Detroit Become Human, that came out recently. That's a David Cage game that asks questions about whether or not robots can become human. And a lot of people are making fun of Detroit Become Human because of that. And the Talos Principle also asks a lot of those same questions, and it asks them probably a lot more intelligently, let's say. I knew I would probably like the Talos Principle. After all, it was on my Steam wishlist for like 3 or 4 years now, but I did not expect to enjoy it quite as much as I am. It's really shooting up there as far as really, really good games go. It's going to be a memorable one for me for a long time, I think. And I'm talking about the themes of the game here, but even like the puzzles are really smart. That's the main meat of the game, is sort of this. You have to collect like these Tetris pieces. Usually they're at the end of like this really short maze section, and it's up to you to figure out how to solve the maze. And there's all these like doors you have to unlock, and you have to beware other robots and turrets, and there's a way to disable turrets, and it all gets very complex very quickly. And it's a good time. I recommend, if you haven't played it yet, go get the Talos Principle, because that is a surprisingly enjoyable game. Apologies if I sound like a little bit phlegmy or weird right now. It's just that season for me. Like, it's not really allergy season anymore, but I've had like this stuff at the back of my throat for the last week. You might even notice it in the Mania review that there are some parts of it where I sound a little bit nasally, and that's because, I've got this crud that's, I guess it's probably like the last vestiges of allergy season, like getting ready to go away. I don't really have like a stuffy nose or anything, but I've just got like this phlegm in the back of my throat that's making it kind of weird to talk the proper way, like, use your nose to talk or whatever. Boy, that's a concept, isn't it? But besides my birthday, nothing else has really been going on, because it's mainly just been full steam ahead on the Sonic Mania review. And, if you're listening to this, definitely, please go watch the video review. It is out now. It's on my YouTube channel. I posted about it on Patreon. I posted about it on Tumblr, on Twitter. Like, it's my pinned tweet right now on my Twitter profile. It is everywhere that I could think to put it. It's on tsscnews.com. They ran it live on Twitch on Monday night, which was weird. I didn't see it live because I was asleep, because I've been pulling almost all-nighters trying to get this video review done. We're talking like, 4 hours of sleep a night some nights. And so, I slept through the premiere. It was like at 11 o'clock Eastern, 8 p.m. Pacific. And I live community reactions, I have no idea. I could probably go on the TSSC News Twitch channel and rewatch the archive of that if it comes to it. Actually, that's not a bad idea. I should go think about doing that before they remove it. But yeah, go watch the video review, watch it twice, maybe. I don't know if I'm supposed to be saying that, actually, come to think of it. I think there might be a rule where I can't tell people to go watch a video more than once to specifically boost my ratings. So watch it once, just once. That's all I need. That thing I just said about watching it twice, don't worry about that. I was kidding. That wasn't serious. It's all just jokes here on the Patreon Party People podcast. Don't worry about it. Don't think about it. It's okay. Everything's fine. I'm not trying to commit crimes. That was not my intent. That was a momentary lapse of judgment. Anyway, what really surprised me about the video review, getting it finally done, was that it came out to 30 minutes and 30 seconds. And, you think already, oh yeah, 30, that's pretty funny, right? And then you look at the other, okay. So I made a big deal about the big video. I was calling it the big video for the longest time. It's actually titled, How Do We Fix Sonic? And, you know, I was making a big deal about that video for like almost a year straight. It was a really long time I was working on that video. And I was like in serious production for at least 9 months on that video. But, you know, from start to finish, that video took me like 18 months to put together entirely. And that was the longest piece of produced, edited content for my channel. And that came out 2 years ago. And that was a 30-minute video. As it turns out, it was a 30-minute, 30-second video. So, you know, I've now done 2 videos that are 30 minutes, 30 seconds long, and that's a little bit weird. And like, what's really impressive to me is like in the context of it taking me 18 months to put together the How Do We Fix Sonic video. Technically speaking, I did this Sonic Mania video review in like less than half that time. Like, well, definitely less than half that time. What is it? You figure 18 divided by 2 is 9? Yeah, I definitely did not spend 9 months on this video review. I mean, okay, so obviously Sonic Mania came out last year, 2017. It was like August 22nd, 2017, if I remember properly. And the PC version of that was delayed until like September 2nd, 2017, right? So you could say that from September 2nd, 2017 until July, what was it? I finished it on the 14th. So September 2nd, 2017 to July 14th, 2018. That is what? September to October, November, December, and then +7. So 3 + 7, 10 months. So, you know, maybe that was 9 months. But then you have to consider, like, the situation I've been dealing with since then. So I ended up having my script finished and written probably by the end of September, right? And then I finally got my desktop back up and running because I figured while I was staying at my brother's, because I had just moved from Colorado to Nevada, and I was living at my brother's while we could find a place to live. And since Sonic Mania had come out, we hadn't found a place to live yet. I took my computer out of storage and I figured, okay, I'll do the video review at my brother's. You know, it's not the ideal situation because, you know, they have newborn twins, they have, you know, all kinds of stuff going on over there. But then my computer broke. And, you know, for the longest time, I had the audio I'd recorded from the video review, and I had the script, and that was kind of it. I didn't have any video recorded. I wasn't ready to start editing. I wasn't even close to starting to edit. And then my computer stayed broke from, like, the end of October until March, roughly. So, gosh, what is that? That's like 5 months right there. So for 5 months, the Sonic Mania video review remained dormant, completely dormant. It was just a script, and it was me reading the audio in the closet at my brother's place. Real production on the Sonic Mania video review didn't start until after I did the Sonic Mania stream in April of 2018, and I think that was around April 24th? April 23rd, roughly. After that, that's when I started capturing video in earnest. That's when I started revising my video review script to update it for, you know, eventual release in 2018. So if you figure that real, actual, serious production on the video review did not start until April until July is like 4 months. So, you know, the last 30-minute video I did took me a year and a half. The current 30-minute video I did took me like 4 months. That's not actually that bad. Like, I've been beating myself up for a really long time for how long it's taken me to get this Sonic Mania video review out and done and finished. But in the context of it only really taking me 4 months to put together, that's actually, like, I'm actually pretty proud of myself in that context. I think I did a pretty good job. And obviously, there are other reasons for that. The Sonic Mania video review doesn't have quite as much original artwork. I can lean more heavily on having footage of video games. There's not really as much, visual aesthetic design I have to worry about. All this other, sort of stuff that really streamlined the process of putting together this video review. So yeah, I did good. I think I did good. But the video review might have actually been done a little bit sooner though, but there was something else that kind of ended up distracting me for a little while. And that was that my cat Maymay ended up getting tremendously ill in the middle of production. So it was to tell the story a little bit, it was we're talking around the end of June that she just out of nowhere just started throwing up a lot, once a day. Which is, you think about it, that's fine. She's a cat. Cats kind of barf a lot. There are biological reasons for that are, somewhat normal, but she was getting violently sick. We're talking a projectile spray across a worryingly large radius. And, that was happening about once a day. Then it started happening multiple times per day. And it started kind of increasing in frequency. It started once a day, and then it was twice a day, and then it was kind of after every time she'd eat. Which, isn't good. That's a sign that, maybe something is seriously wrong with her. And us, we don't have a lot of money. We try to avoid taking our animals to the vet if possible. And that super sucks, but it's the same reason that we ourselves never go to the hospital unless it's absolutely unavoidable, right? And, with her getting sick, we were definitely looking into taking her to a vet just in case. And vets out here in Nevada are way more expensive than they were in Colorado, nearly twice as much. So it becomes this situation where it's can we afford to take her in? This was kind of the end of the month, so, we weren't exactly in a good financial position to be taking her in. We were kind of weighing our options here. And meanwhile, the cat is still, she's getting violently sick, everywhere. So we start running down a list of, things that could be wrong. Maybe it's, for example, maybe it's her cat food. In the past, if we've given her, certain textures of cat food, with lots of gravy or, certain kinds of bits or textures, it would make her get sick more often. So, as kind of a patch on trying to, get her feeling well again, we went out and we bought her, various different kinds of foods that we considered safe for her to eat, foods that we knew wouldn't really necessarily make her sick, which is, also foods that she doesn't really like to eat very much, which is why we usually go for the more quote-unquote riskier stuff, that food that she seems to like, but food that has a chance to upset her tummy. And, we give her those safe foods, and she kind of walks up to the dish, sniffs at them, and walks away. She won't eat them because, it's the kind of food she doesn't like. And this goes on for about a day. She sniffs her food. She doesn't like it. She walks away. But she's also still getting sick all the time, even though she's not eating this food. So, we're thinking, well, if she's not eating the food we're giving her, we'll give her the food that we know she likes. And then at the very least, she'll eat, right? She'll, be getting nutrition, even though it'll just all come right back up. And we give her the food that she likes, and now she won't eat that either. So we're going on, we'll say 2 days where the cat hasn't eaten any food, and she's still, barfing everywhere 2 or 3 times a day. And the big worry starts to set in. Social media followers may remember I used to have a Pomeranian dog named Fozzie. He was a tiny little yappy dog, the most lovable little guy in the world. And we had Fozzie for about 7 or 8 years when it became pretty clear that he wasn't doing so hot anymore. He was having trouble going on walks. He wasn't as energetic. You know, he was kind of starting to show his age. When we got him, we figured he was about 2 to 3 years old. So at this point in the story, he was maybe 9 or 10, maybe 11 years old. So, you know, in dog years, he was starting to get up there. And those little dogs, they don't live as long as the big dogs do anyway. So it was getting pretty close to a time, let's say. And something similar started happening to him. A little bit after Thanksgiving, he started kind of getting sick every now and then. And, you know, it started out kind of slow, but it hit a point where it sort of ramped up really, really quickly to where, you know, he was getting sick a lot, really quick. And we ended up rushing him to the emergency room at like 11 o'clock one night. And by the time the vet checked him out, he was already gone. They say it was probably some sort of liver failure. It was just, you know, he was an old little dog. It was his time to go. And it devastated us, particularly my mom, who has kind of blamed herself ever since for not getting him to the vet just even one day sooner. But vet visits aren't cheap, and, you know, again, it was the end of the month, and we were waiting for money to come in so that we could, you know, schedule a proper visit and not have to rush him to the emergency room one night. And, you know, that event, she swore never again, no more pets. She refused to let our money problems do that to another animal ever again. And not even a week after Fozzie died, our neighbor came to us. She was moving to California, and she asked if we could look after her cat for a couple months while she found a place to live. And that couple months turned into 6 months, almost 7 months. And finally, this neighbor begrudgingly came back to get her cat, but we decided it wasn't the right time for that because our living situation still wasn't the best. So we just ended up keeping that cat permanently. And that's how we ended up with May May. You know, obviously my mom was protesting having another animal quite a bit, but, you know, circumstances ended up what they were. And it was kind of hard to avoid taking her, you know. It was either we took her or she ended up in a pound or something, you know, a shelter where she'd end up being killed or, you know, who knows what. So we had a cat like less than a week after our dog died, less than a week after like that dog's death crushed us. We had a cat. We don't know how old May May is. We've had her for about 5.5 years. That was what, November, December 2012 that we ended up getting her. So, you know, about 6 years, give or take. So, you know, in cat years, she could be very well getting up there in age too. And now here she is having very similar problems to the dog that had died, you know, when we got her. So the fear here was real. History seemed like it was, you know, maybe repeating itself. So my mom started looking up symptoms online, and she comes to some people saying that their cats were going through something similar, but what it ended up being for them was an impacted hairball. And this is an especially big problem with Maine Coons, which May May is a Maine Coon. She's a very large, fluffy cat. And you know it's a Maine Coon because their fur kind of makes like this M shape on their forehead. And like the symptoms were, you know, weight loss, loss of appetite. They just start throwing up everywhere all the time. And, you know, these things are starting to line up. And I guess that's something else I forgot to mention. May May was a pretty fat cat. And I say was a pretty fat cat. When we moved into this apartment back in November, the apartment made us take her in for a physical examination so that, you know, they could determine that she was healthy, that she didn't have any like pre-existing conditions or whatever. And the vet weighed her and said May May was exactly 12 pounds on the nose, you know, 12.0 pounds. And the vet lady told us that that was a little bit overweight, that, you know, she wasn't exactly like morbidly obese or anything, but, you know, she could stand to drop a pound, that 11 pounds would be the ideal weight for the size of cat she was. And like I said, that was back in November. Since November, May has lost 3 pounds. The last time I weighed her about 3-4 weeks ago, the scale said she weighed 9.2 pounds. This cat now feels like skin and bones. She has lost a lot of weight. We couldn't figure out why. As far as we could tell, like, her eating habits hadn't really changed. She was still eating all of her breakfast. She was still eating all of her dinner. We didn't know what was wrong with her, and that was a kind of another notch in the board that, maybe she's starting to get old. She's losing all this weight. So, that's just something that happens to old cats. Maybe we really weren't sure. But now we have these posts about, impacted hairballs and, weight loss of appetite, aggressive vomiting, let's say. So we ended up chasing all over the state of Nevada looking for a very specific brand of hairball medication and like a very specific flavor of hairball medication. It was Heart's malt-flavored hairball medication gel. From what she had read online, Heart's actually had like multiple flavors of this hairball medication. They had malt, they had salmon, and they had chicken. And from what she read, cats typically did not like the salmon or the chicken. They liked the malt. All we could find was the salmon. But, salmon was better than nothing, so that's kind of what we ended up buying. Or rather, I guess technically I bought it because, once again, here we were at the end of the month and we were waiting for money to come through. So, I ended up having a little bit money saved up. So we kind of went half and half on this $7 tube of hairball medication. And what you're supposed to do with this stuff is that you smear it on their paw, and then they lick it off, and that's how they get the medication. And you're supposed to do this every day for 4 days straight. So day 1, we smear it on her paw, and she licks it off just fine. No change in behavior. By now, she's just kind of barfing up little bits of foam because she hasn't eaten or even really drank in almost 3 days. Day 2, we smear some more of it on her paw, and now she doesn't act too thrilled about it. She sniffs at it, tries to shake the gel off, and does lick at it a little bit, but clearly doesn't want anything to do with it. And by now, now the insomnia is setting in. I've got the stress from the video review bearing down on me. I've got the stress from the cat bearing down on me. And the two are kind of like really starting to collide really hard. And I'm not really getting anything done. I'm not really getting any sleep. It's just, it's kind of a mess. And now it's the morning of the 3rd day. As per the instructions, by now we should start seeing a difference in her behavior. We should start seeing, her appetite come back or whatever. And as far as we can tell, nothing has changed. She's still not eating. She's still not drinking. And things are starting to feel really serious. But she has stopped getting sick. But again, we don't really know why. Is it the medication that's helping her? Is her body shutting down? Is she not getting sick because there's nothing left in her anymore? Is this cat dying, for lack of a better word? And by now, my mom is starting to look up the phone numbers for vets so that we can take May in later that morning, with the very serious possibility that we might not come home with her, that we might take her into the vet and she might need to be euthanized to put her out of whatever misery she's suffering. For the last 72 hours, this cat has been getting increasingly antisocial. All she's really done is sleep and throw up, and now that she's stopped throwing up, all she's really doing is sleeping. She isn't begging for attention, she isn't laying with us at night. She just sleeps on the floor by herself. And I look over at her, and as she's sleeping, she's clearly having a dream. Her nose is twitching, her paws are moving. It almost looks like she's dreaming about running. It kind of breaks my heart a little bit, because it's like she's dreaming of times where she's felt better. And, I look away, I go back to work on my video review, or I try at the very least. And a few minutes later, suddenly I feel this little paw on my arm, accompanied by a weak little meow. Maymay has woken up, stood up next to my computer chair, and is tugging at me for attention. This is what she does when she wants to be fed. It's 5 a.m. at this point. The sun has just barely come up. Normally, her feeding times are between 7 a.m. and 7 p.m. But, given the circumstances, the concept of normal feeding times have kinda gone out the window. And she follows me into the kitchen, waits while I wash out her food dish, and I give her a fresh can of cat food. And she eats it. Not a lot, not any more than a few bites, but it's more than she's eaten in almost 5 days. Literally, an hour away from taking this cat into the vet thinking she's dying, and now she's finally showing some signs of improvement. She avoids dinner that night, but the next morning it's the same deal. 5 a.m. and she's begging for food. Around the same time, we notice she's left what appears to be a little bit of a hairball she pooped out, which is what the medicine said it would help with. And this day, she doesn't just eat a little bit one time, she practically cleans her food dish. And day by day, she's eating more and more and more, to the point where you'll set her food dish down and within an hour it'll be empty and she'll be begging for more. It was obviously a hairball in retrospect, because once she pooped that little bit out, my mom actually stopped giving her the medication and the symptoms did start to come back. So we went out and we bought Hart's hairball medication treats, which you're supposed to give cats a couple times a week to, help control their hairballs. We've been giving her those for about a week now and she seems to really like them. She's kind of back to acting completely healthy and normal. And about an hour ago, she actually hacked up what is probably the biggest hairball I've ever seen from her. We're talking like 1.5 inches in length. She did not really get sick anything else, it was just this giant, massive hairball that came up. And if I had to guess, that one hairball right there was probably what's been causing all of her problems. Because the size of it cannot be understated. It is giant. So hopefully she's all better. She certainly seems to be, for how much food she seems to beg for all the time now. It's actually pretty annoying for how starved this cat acts now. But with that story out of the way, I think it's time we take a little bit of a break. See you after the music. And we're back. For you, it's only been 45 seconds, maybe a minute. For me, it's been 4 or 5, about 5 hours. I didn't intend to take that long of a break. My plan was to just watch an episode of Garth Marenghi's Dark Place on YouTube and then sort of get right back into it, giving my vocal cords time to rest, getting a drink, going to the bathroom, things like that. I ended up doing a lot more. I went on a walk to go get the mail. I had some ice cream. Ice cream is choice, especially the flavor I had, which was, oddly enough, it's the middle of July. I found a store carrying eggnog ice cream. I found it for Christmas last year. And I don't know if they just had like a pack sitting in the back or whatever, but they had eggnog ice cream out for sale a few days ago. So I picked up a tub. I think it was like $2.50 at our local. We have like weird supermarkets out here. I think it's called Food Max. I don't know. And you can tell, like, the ice cream, the texture feels like maybe it's a little bit old. But you know what? I don't care. I like me some eggnog. Like, eggnog is up there, top 5 beverages of choice. And then you make eggnog ice cream, and it's just like, oh, that is the good stuff. But I am back now. I changed positions a little bit. Where I don't know if you guys will notice like any kind of change in sound quality, but I am, as always, trying to maximize. Got a little bit of ice cream in my throat. I am trying to maximize sound quality here in my bedroom, which is still like super echoey sometimes. But basically, to explain how this sound setup is, instead of like sitting in my closet like I was doing previously, which, sounds really weird, I think, now the closet is open. I'm sitting outside the closet, but I'm speaking into the closet. The microphone is inside the closet. So, again, I'm hoping like the clothes I have hanging in there will be like sound dampening or whatever, because I was listening to videos I recorded when I was still back in Colorado. And man, like, I don't know what it was about the room I was recording in, but it was like a recording studio for how well, like, sound dampened in that place. I don't really understand how I managed to get such good, like, sound quality out of that room, because it wasn't like a special kind of room or anything. It was just, normal painted walls. It was this ugly old carpet that had been worn down from like 20 or 30 years of people walking on it. Like, there were clothes hanging up in it because it like doubled as a laundry room, but there wasn't enough clothes to like cover every surface of every wall. So I don't really understand why there was so little echo in that room, but it is definitely a struggle trying to minimize echo where I live now. To tell you the truth, I don't think echo sounds that bad where I am now. Like, I think I mostly have it under control. It's mainly just like background sound and whatever, but I'm trying to maximize the quality of my voiceover as much as possible. And I think, maybe this closet solution I have now, maybe that's the way it'll be in the future, because I did do a very short test recording to see how the echo sounded, and like I can still hear a little bit of echo here and there, but it's not as bad as it could be, let's say. And I guess, jumping right back into part 2 of this podcast, we're just, from here on out, it's basically just going to be me talking about the production of the Sonic Mania review. Patreon donors out there, if you don't know, I updated the Patreon recently with tons of material for all kinds of parts of the video that, you might be interested in. I uploaded raw versions of all the artwork, so all, the sprite artwork I did, the animated GIFs that were in the video, the little bits of animation, like, the speech bubbles popping out and stuff like that. Those are all there. There are pieces of unused artwork that I posted on the Patreon, because there was at least one sequence that was going to have artwork accompanying it, and I ended up finding a better way to convey that information without having to use my own artwork. And in retrospect, I say this in the Patreon post, I think it ends up working better the way it is now instead of using my artwork. But if you want to see that artwork, that's on the Patreon. All of this is set to where you only have to donate $1 to see all of it. And obviously, also in addition to the artwork, I posted a clean edited version of the audio that I recorded in 2017 from my brother's bedroom, or my brother. Well, it was a bedroom, but it was the closet in the bedroom. So you can hear, the original what was it, September or October 2017 version of the script, which is, kind of different. It's not like vastly different. I still say most of the same things, but I did end up cutting stuff out of the script, replacing it with different things, switching things around. There are definitely things I say in the original version of the review that did not make it to the final version that went up the other day. So, if you want to listen to that, that's up there on the Patreon. I don't know if that's a $1 donation or not. The artwork is a $1 donation because I noticed on my my goals listing or whatever, like my fees listing, I didn't really have a tier. Oh, that's what it's a tier listing. I did not have a tier for artwork, so I just set it as $1. I think maybe with the audio it might be a $2 donation, because I do have a tier for like early access to certain things about videos and whatever. So I think that's the $2 level, but don't quote me on that. If you go to my Patreon, I'm sure it'll tell you whether it's $1 or $2. So that's something to keep in mind. Oh, and I wrote here in the notes that the version of the audio I put up, I added music and everything, so it's kind of like a review podcast. That's something that I've been toying with, an idea for a while now, is instead of doing like the big song and dance production of, putting out these super long video reviews, putting all this effort into, capturing video, syncing everything up, it taking weeks and months and whatever to put all this stuff together. In between those big videos, I thought about maybe like making shorter reviews, shorter text reviews, and then sort of turning those into a podcast where I just read my own reviews. And that's kind of what this Sonic Mania 2017 audio is sort of patterned after. It's consider it like a test run, I guess. I also wrote in here that it's kind of like listening to an alternate universe version of the review, so there is that. Up top, I'd like to apologize if you watched the Sonic Mania video review and the frame rate stuttering bothered you. I mentioned this again on the Patreon, but for those of you listening to this on YouTube, if you noticed stuttering during the Sonic Mania review, I am sorry. For some reason, the recordings I did of Sonic Mania just did that, and it wasn't really something that I could visibly notice happen until after I'd published the video review. So it's not like I could have just gone back. Like, it wasn't something that I noticed while I was playing the game. Ergo, it wasn't something I could really solve until it was already too late. So, that's the way it ended up. And it sucks. I hate it. I never really thought I was like a stickler for video quality or anything like that. But with a game like Sonic Mania, it's the sort of game that can kind of run on a toaster, so it doesn't really need a super powerful system. So to see it like having frame rate problems is a little weird. That's a little annoying, and that's not something I wanted to, portray with the game. And this is like, I've complained in the past about like a stuttering issue in Sonic Forces, but the stuttering in Sonic Forces is, honestly, I think it's a different issue, because when I'd play Sonic Forces on the PC, I'd notice the stuttering as I was playing, regardless of whether or not I was recording. With Sonic Mania, as far as I could tell, the game itself looked fine to me. It was only the recording that stuttered. So I don't know if it's like an issue with OBS or whether it's an issue with my NVIDIA drivers or whether it's an issue with my hard drive. Some of you may know that I was having like weird hard drive errors during the middle of production on the Sonic Mania video review. So it could very well mean that I need a new hard drive. The hard drive I have in there right now is about 2 terabytes, and it's going on about 4 years old. So it's probably around that time that I should think about replacing it. And I think a new 2 terabyte hard drive is like, I don't know, $140. I think that's what no, I think $140 is what I paid for it originally, or something, somewhere around there. I think a 2 terabyte hard drive will probably be a little less expensive nowadays, but that's just an unfortunate thing. I'm sorry if the stuttering bothers you. It bothers me too. It's just, it's not something I could have fixed beforehand. And with regards to it like being something like a problem with OBS, the recordings I made with software that wasn't OBS, like if I used NVIDIA Shadowplay, or even if like I captured video of a console game through my Elgato, I don't think those had the same frame rate problems. It was only stuff I recorded through OBS, and even then, I think it was only Sonic Mania. If you look at the footage I captured of like Sonic 1, Sonic 2, Sonic Jam, those games all captured stutter-free. It was just Sonic Mania. So like even then, it could be like a de novo issue, you know? I mean, maybe that could also be what's affecting Sonic Forces, you know? De novo phones home every few seconds or every few minutes or whatever, and that could be impacting the recording just enough to where the frame rate stutters in OBS. But like I said, it is what it is. There's nothing I could do to fix it. If I could have fixed it, I would have, but that would have meant spending, you know, several days recapturing all of my footage all over again, and that's not something I wanted to do. I've already beaten Sonic Mania like 6 times at this point. And, you know, I have Sonic Mania Plus sitting here, so we're looking at me finishing Sonic Mania at least 3 more times, if not more. So, you know, I've played this game probably more than I should have, especially when you consider what I said in the review about not really feeling like playing Sonic Mania ever again. I am beyond the point of burnout on this game. And it's kind of funny now that the Sonic Mania video review is out. Working on it for so long, you know, having some version of the script finished since like late September, early October, and sort of sitting on it for so long, and it taking so long to like put together all the footage and everything like that. It gave me a lot of time to like really sit and think about the kinds of reactions people would have to what I had to say about Sonic Mania. And now that the video review's been out for like a day or 2 now, like every reaction I predicted people would have is coming true, like every single one. Like I've had people tell me that the reason I didn't like Sonic Mania is because I'm jealous, which is ridiculous because at the end of the review, I totally say I like Sonic Mania. I think it's the ultimate Sonic game. I don't think it's the best Sonic game ever made, but I do think it's the ultimate Sonic game. And I like the game. I like it enough that I've played like 30 hours of Sonic Mania at this point. Even if I am at the point of burnout, and I am at the point of burnout and pushing past the point of burnout, you know, I wouldn't get to that point if I didn't like Sonic Mania a whole lot. But I am very picky about the game because, you know, these are people that I know. This is, you know, people that are in a sense close to me. Like, we don't talk, but they're acquaintances. They're like work acquaintances, I guess, right? It's a weird feeling, and it's just, I want them to represent us properly. I want them to do right by the Sonic franchise. I'm harsh because I care. That's what it is. It's not jealousy. I'm harsh because I care. Even though there is, yes, a little bit of jealousy in there, but I'm harsh because I care. That's it. That's the reasoning. And like, this happened many, many years ago. probably around like 2011, the Sonic Amateur Games Expo. One of the very first I wrote for TSSE News. I remember I just savaged all the fan games in the reviews. And people were like rightfully calling me on that. They were like, what the heck? What are you doing? We're just fan games. Why are you being so harsh on us? And it was the same thing. I'm harsh because I care, because I think you can do better. I know you can do better. I can see the potential here, and you have to live to the full potential. And with Sonic Mania, like, there's a lot on the line with regards to, this is the community's chance to show that it can get things right. And I want the best foot forward. I was the same way with the Unleashed project, that mod that ported Sonic Unleashed to Sonic Generations. I was extremely harsh on certain elements of that mod, and I was harsh because I cared, because I love Sonic Unleashed, and I want people to love it in the same way that I do. And to do that, that means I want people to live up to my standards, I guess, which is, I never really thought I was that kind of jerk, but maybe I am. But at the same time, maybe that standard of quality is important. Nobody likes a person who nitpicks. That I know that firsthand. Like, not that anyone's ever really complained about me nitpicking, but I've complained about other people who have, been like super nitpicky and annoying. And nobody likes that person, but also at the same time, when it comes to professional creative endeavors, nitpicking is what separates good from great. Nitpicking is what separates like Ratchet and Clank from Super Mario Odyssey, right? That's what matters. And that's all I want. I want people to constantly strive to the highest standard of quality they can manage. And that means being the, overbearing father figure sometimes, where you're like, you can do better, you need to do better. Like, that's the tone of voice I'm trying to get across. Then I have people telling me that, like, my complaints about classic Sonic nostalgia being so overbearing are kind of unfounded, because that stuff's, always been there. And, that's actually sort of true. That's something I noticed as I was editing the video together, that, all the way back to Sonic Pocket Adventure in 2000, you had a level that was Green Hill Zone, and then you had Green Hill Zone in Sonic Adventure 2, that was 2001, and then you have Seaside Hill in Sonic Heroes, that's 2004, and that's sort of like a Green Hill Zone type level. And then again in Sonic Heroes, you have the return of Metal Sonic, and actually, come to think of it, Metal Sonic also turns up in Sonic Adventure 2 as like a multiplayer skin. So there are certain elements that, have been like reoccurring elements. You had Neo Green Hill Zone in Sonic Advance. You had the Green Hill Zone unlockable map in Sonic Battle. You had that might have actually been it. But my point is that there is a clear delineation from before Sonic 4 and after Sonic 4. After Sonic 4, Sega doubles and triples and quadruples down on the idea of selling Sonic as nostalgia, of selling Sonic as, hey, remember the Sega Genesis games? Look at how we can reference these. We brought back Motobugs, we brought back Buzz Bombers, we brought back Green Hill Zone. Here's a boss from Sonic 2, but he's slightly different. Here's something from Sonic 3, but it's slightly different. It kind of became Christmas every day. It went from, an occasional secret Easter egg hidden deep within the game to being this in-your-face all the time, hey, remember when, over and over and over and over and over and over. And that sucks. Like, that was my point. Even if they've had, Green Hill Zone stuff for a really long time, it was never as bad as it was after Sonic 4 came out. After this, Project Needle Mouse proved just how insane people would go if you reminded them of the Sega Genesis games, even if you did so in bad faith, let's say. And then, of course, there are people who just think I'm crazy for saying the game has poor pacing. And it's like, I'm willing to bet a lot of the comments from people who are like, oh, the pacing's fine, I like Sonic Mania the way it is. I'm willing to bet a lot of the people who are saying things like that are probably under the age of 25. Like, I don't mean to shame people for being young. Again, I am 35. I'm getting up there in age. I'm not exactly a teenager anymore, but I'm also not exactly an old man. I am an adult. But I also went through that phase when I was younger. Like, I'd come home from whatever, and I'd load up Quake 3 Arena, and I'd set the frag limit to like 500 or 1,000, and I'd just play on the same map for 2 or 3 hours, fragging the same, 10, 12, 15 bots over and over and over, and that was my evening. It's just this one Quake 3 map, the same dozen bots, go for as long as humanly possible. And I was fine with that. That sort of long haul, I'm here for the long haul. That was something I was okay with. And then I also remember way back when I got into developing games, like, we're talking like 2000, 2001, 2002. One of my favorite things ever back then, was building the largest levels possible. Obviously, there aren't going to be that many people listening to this podcast that remember, but one of the very first demos for Sonic the Faded Hour was this chemical plant zone level, and it was this really early technology test. It was sort of like this revolutionary paradigm shift in how Sonic fan games calculated collision detection in Click Team Fusion. And it was an idea that I'd gotten from a friend, Ashura DM. He was a DDR musician. Gosh, I can't talk today. But he was a DDR musician, and he came to me, explaining this concept for collision detection, and I implemented it in the very first engine test for Sonic the Faded Hour. And in this engine test, what I ended up doing was building this chemical plant zone level, and it was this monstrous level. It was the biggest level Click Team Fusion would allow at the time, which was something like 15,000 pixels wide by 15,000 pixels tall. And it was a maze, it was the biggest, most intricate level I could manage at the time. And I had a blast putting it together. It was like building my own little world. There were so many different pathways and just, secrets, and just, it was such a maze. It was so easy to get lost in that level. And I thought that was the coolest thing in the world, to build a level that big. But that's because I was young, that's what I was looking for in games, was this super big, super tedious level. And then, eventually you reach this point where you turn into an adult. And it's like, people tell me with Sonic Mania, they're like, oh, a zone in Sonic Mania is only 20 minutes long. And it's like, once you reach a certain age, not even because of work, not even because you have kids, but just because you're old enough to have a lot of different things to pay attention to, 20 minutes can be the most valuable time in your life, right? 20 minutes can seem like an eternity, and like both in good and bad ways, right? Like, getting 20 minutes to yourself can seem like a paradise, and, having 20 minutes taken away from you can seem like the worst thing in the world. And that's just what being an adult is like. But I will continue to get comments, and I will continue to filter through and respond to the comments as I see fit. but I assume it's probably going to be a lot of variance on the 3 things I just said, which, you know, again, that's kind of what I anticipated. But, you know, also, I like responding to YouTube comments I get, you know, that's my community. I'm small enough yet to where my channel hasn't grown to a point where reading all the comments and responding to all the comments has not yet become overwhelming. So I'll be having fun with that for the next few days, or however long I keep getting comments in about that. And I guess that's probably the end of the Sonic Mania review production talk. But, you know, we're going to roll right in next to talking about Sonic Mania Plus. Because I did end up getting a review copy of Sonic Mania Plus a couple days before the street date. You know, nothing extreme, but I did end up getting it a little bit early, and I have put, you know, we'll say about an hour, 2 hours into it by now, so we can talk about that a little bit, you know, as in the general podcast winding down sort of, oh, what games have I been playing, you know, that sort of thing. And, you know, that's thinking about it now, that's probably the first, like, actual review copy I've ever gotten of a game. Like, I've gotten review copies of games before, but never, like, before the street date. It's always been something where, like, way back in the day, Sega would send us review copies of games, and they were always, like, a week late. It was always well after launch. But here, you know, they actually offered it to us early, and, you know, even though everyone else got theirs like a week before us, you know, I still ended up getting my copy a little bit early, and, you know, that's a pretty cool feeling. It's one of those, you know, steps where it's like, oh yeah, you know, I'm kind of a professional at this now, you know? And I will say about Sonic Mania Plus that it's like, it's a good thing I didn't hold my review back to talk specifically about Plus. Because holding my review back to talk about Plus would have thrown like that whole production schedule into disarray for a game that honestly isn't that different from vanilla Sonic Mania. Like, Ray and Mighty are cool, but they're like, they play differently, but the levels themselves aren't really changed very much to support them. There are a few routes for Mighty with his stomp/slam maneuver that are like new that you couldn't get to before, but picking out where those are is like super difficult. Like, there was one I found in Lava Reef Zone, and I don't remember seeing any before Lava Reef Zone, so either I missed them or, you know, there haven't been very many massive changes to these levels in order to facilitate Mighty or Ray. And like, a lot of the boss fights weren't really changed. You know, obviously we have a new form for Metal Sonic where he, you know, he hulks out and he kind of turns into his Knuckles Chaotix form. That's something new. But by and large, it really seems like most of the same game that I talked about in my review. There aren't really too many changes to invalidate what I had to say, let's say. Encore mode, though, you know, again, like, levels... Okay, so to start from the top, Encore mode is supposed to be a remixed version of Sonic Mania with kind of a new tag mechanic. And, like, first of all, the levels aren't remixed very much. Like, you get new color palettes, but as far as actual differences inside of levels themselves, they aren't really, like, super obvious. I'm sure the changes, like, are there. They're definitely there. There are places I run into and I think, oh, this feels a little bit different, but for the most part, the game feels exactly the same as it used to. It just looks a little bit different. It's not even necessarily harder, it's just, it looks a little bit different, like I said. Encore mode also introduces 7 brand new special stages for you to chase a UFO. Those are actually vastly different. Compared to the levels themselves, the special stages have been top to bottom totally redesigned to be way, way, way more significantly harder than the original special stages were. I've hit a couple special stages here and there to chase the UFO and get the emerald, and I never even get close to the UFO. It's always miles ahead of me. I always run into spikes or whatever. The special stages are so twisty and turny and full of so many like 90-degree hairpin turns. It almost feels a little on the unfair side, but again, this is an extra bonus mode. This is supposed to be for people who've like played through all of Sonic Mania and still want more, right? I assume that's the point of Encore mode. So the idea that special stages are super duper hard, that's fine. I'm not going to complain too loudly about that. There's also a brand new pinball minigame replacing the blue spheres. That's new to Encore mode. And I don't really like the pinball minigame. Like, part of the reason I burned out on vanilla Sonic Mania is definitely because there are way too many Blue Spheres minigames in there. There's something like 32 or 64 stages, and that is way too many Blue Spheres. But the pinball minigame isn't really that much better. Like, there's no specific puzzle to the pinball minigame. It's mainly just about picking up power-ups like shields and extra characters and things like that. And that's fine, but the pinball table itself is really sparsely detailed. The physics feel really sluggish. It's really hard to bounce yourself straight into the well that ends your game. Like the very first time I loaded into the pinball stage, I basically shot up, bounced off something, and it spiked me right down where I left the bonus minigame pinball table. Like, I didn't even really get a chance to touch a flipper. So, it's not the best, it's not the greatest, but I think I will take it over Blue Spheres because, more than anything, I am so sick of Blue Spheres. It would have been nice if Sonic Mania had a selection of mini games, sort of like what Sonic 3 and Knuckles had, where, you had the slot machine, you had the gumball machine, and then you had the electricity orbs, the whatever that was. So you had, 3 different bonus mini games that could be accessed from any like star post checkpoint or whatever. And that was fine. That was something, I really hope Sonic Mania would have had. And with this pinball minigame, that's something that I would have hoped populated out beyond Encore mode. I expected that, maybe in what they call Mania mode, the original mode, maybe you'd have sort of a Sonic 3 and Knuckles sort of situation where depending on how many rings you had when you touched a checkpoint, maybe it would send you to the pinball table or the Blue Spheres minigame, but that did not end up being the case. So that is definitely one of those things where I think Sonic Mania is actively worse than previous Sonic games, let's say. There definitely could have been more variety to break up just how many times you do Blue Spheres, because it is way too many. But the big change for Encore mode is something I actually really do like, and it's this tag system. So Encore mode completely gets rid of the live system that's in original Sonic Mania. You do not pick up extra one-ups when you break open TV boxes. Instead, you kind of have like stocks of extra characters. So let's say that like you start Encore mode. You don't get to pick your character for starters. You always start as just Sonic by himself. And you end up in Angel Island Zone. And after like 30 seconds or a minute of playing through a very simplified version of Angel Island Zone, you end up running into a capsule chamber where you have an option of rescuing either Mighty the Armadillo or Ray the Flying Squirrel. And from then on, you're Sonic plus that other character. So, for example, let's say you're Sonic and Mighty. At any time, you can press the triangle button, or I guess the Y button if you're on an Xbox controller, or an X button if you're on a Switch. Is it the X button on the Switch? I'm not sure. It would be the X button if it was the standard Nintendo button layout, let's say. The topmost button. And when you push that button, you switch. You tag out, and if you're Sonic, you would become Mighty. If you were Mighty, you would then become Sonic. If you pick up a 1-up box, instead of giving you a 1-up, it'll give you a random character. So let's say, as Sonic and Mighty, I hit a 1-up box, and it gives me Knuckles. And down below, where the lives icon would normally be, it's a Sonic icon, it's a Mighty icon, and then it's a Knuckles icon. And if either Sonic or Mighty dies, then they will be replaced with Knuckles, because you had a stock of Knuckles. And you can have up to the entire roster of playable characters. So if I'm Sonic and Mighty, then I can have Knuckles, Tails, and Ray waiting in reserve. And presumably once you run out of characters, then it's a game over. But as long as you have an extra stock of characters, whenever you die, the next character in line replaces whoever died. And you don't even get warped back to like a checkpoint or anything. The old character falls off screen, the new character jumps in, and you keep going right from wherever you were when it happened. And that's a pretty cool way of handling things. It's sort of, checkpoints don't really matter that much. Checkpoints are only really for accessing the pinball minigame. And like, if you get crushed or drowned or fall off into a bottomless pit, then usually you'll get reset back to a checkpoint, like a star post. But otherwise, they don't really mean anything, because every time you die, you just resume right from where you left off, but with a different character. And there's all kinds of like other power-ups to shuffle around, which character you're playing as, which stocks you have, things like that. And it's actually a pretty fun little change that, it spices things up a little bit. It's not something that, I'd like as the main mode in the game or anything like that, but as like a little bonus extra mode, it adds just a little bit of extra twist that is actually it's pretty fun. I like Encore mode, if only for this tag team sort of system. The only other real problem with it is that you can't do co-op in Encore mode, because I don't really know why. It seems like the sort of thing that would adapt to co-op mode really easily, but for whatever reason, it is single player only. But yeah, it's still pretty cool, And I'll get around to putting together that follow-up video for Plus sometime soon. It's probably not going to be very long, because, I said most of what I had to say in the main video reviews, so we'll see how that goes. It might be as short as 5 minutes to talk about Plus, because I do want to explain about Mighty and Ray and things like that. Beyond that, nothing else really has been going on. Like I've been saying this entire time, I've been mainly just laser focused on getting this review done. I did end up playing a little bit more Uncharted 2 yesterday. That was actually pretty fun. I said I wanted to go back to Uncharted 2. And what I'm really liking about that game is that, the story is so much better than the first Uncharted game. The first Uncharted game, the story was so, bland and whatever. And the second story actually gets to be, pretty dark at some points. And there's just a lot more drama. There's a lot more going on. I especially like the character of Chloe Price. She's sort of almost like this Catwoman sort of character, where you're never really sure if she's a good guy or a bad guy, because she's kind of playing both sides. And even though the game kind of spins her as more of a good guy than a bad guy, there's always this doubt in the back of your mind that, eventually she's going to switch sides on you, and then that's just going to be the end of it. And obviously, she comes back in Uncharted 4, so it's pretty easy to assume that she's probably not a bad guy. But she does add a little bit of, extra intrigue into the story. But even then, I only played like maybe an hour of it. So, there's not really much to talk about there. It's just Uncharted 2 continues to be a better game than Uncharted 1, as it turns out. I guess we could have a Final Fantasy VI report if you wanted that. And this is also your cursory spoiler warning for Final Fantasy VI, aka the Super Nintendo version of Final Fantasy III. I'm going to talk about things that are about 10 to 15 hours into the game, so if you don't want to hear that kind of stuff, like if you're playing through it on a Super Nintendo Classic or something, then skip ahead about maybe 5 minutes and maybe I'll be done with it by then. I should be. It doesn't usually take me that long to talk about Final Fantasy VI. So as of the last time I've played Final Fantasy VI, I think I'm up to the Floating Continent, which is, as far as I'm aware, that's where the big changeover happens. It's kind of one of those spoilers you can't really avoid, knowing that something happens to the world map where everything changes, the entire party gets scattered to the winds, and you have to re-find everybody all over again. I think it's called like the World of Chaos or something like that. So presumably I'm right before that switchover, as far as I'm aware. And I do remember hearing that, like, this whole World of Chaos switchover is pretty divisive among fans of Final Fantasy VI. Not everybody likes it. Some people think the game goes to crap after this world map changeover happens. But in the lead up to this, there was one thing that doesn't really sit easy with me. And that is what happens to General Leo. Obviously, sort of like with Eris dying, I knew beforehand that General Leo was not going to survive the game. I knew that there were like fan theories and things on how to bring him back. But obviously, I don't know when he's going to die. I just know that he's going to die. And eventually, I ended up hitting the point where General Leo dies. And it's not the fact that he dies that bothers me. It's what happens to make him die that bothers me. So you get to this point in the game where you get brief control of General Leo. You don't have any of your other party with you. You're just General Leo. And you're at a point in the storyline where previously the Empire, the evil Empire that you've been fighting against the entire game, says they're turning over a new leaf, they're not going to be fighting you anymore. They apologize, they say they're wrong, they're not going to be evil anymore, etc., 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 and they try and help you out. And at this point in the game, the Empire reveals that was all a ruse, that they were evil all along, they were just using you, and by extension, kind of using General Leo, because General Leo's whole thing is that, he buys in, he works for the Empire, and he buys into the fact that the Empire is turning over a new leaf. He's ready to atone for his crimes. He seems like a genuinely good guy. And obviously the Empire spins around and they're like, "Psych, General Leo, we're actually evil. Do you want to fight for us?" And General Leo's kind of like, "No, you guys are evil. I'm not going to do that for you anymore." And Kefka, the big bad, well, at this point he's not the big bad, but he will become the big bad soon. He comes into this and he's like, "Okay, well, I'm just going to kill you all then. And it's up to you, playing as General Leo by yourself, to go and fight Kefka." And at this point, the game presents you with two options. As you control General Leo, you can walk up and talk to Kefka, or you can walk around beside Kefka and talk to a soldier riding in Magitech armor. And I'm thinking that, okay, if I talk to Kefka, this is obviously going to be a boss fight against Kefka. And maybe this guy in the Magitech armor standing next to Kefka, maybe he's like what they call an ad, which means that, he'll be assisting Kefka in the boss fight. So instead of talking to Kefka, I circle around and I talk to the guy in the Magitech armor. And what this actually does is it initiates a battle. And, I kind of expected it would initiate a battle. But instead of being a battle against the guy in Magitech armor, what ends up coming on screen is this big, invincible, super tank that General Leo cannot damage. Basically, your only option when you fight this tank is to let it kill you. And if the tank ends up killing General Leo at this point in the game, you get a game over. That's just it. That's not the canonical way General Leo is supposed to die. You get sent back to your last checkpoint, which is, for me, ended up being 20 minutes prior into the game. It was 4 cutscenes ago. I'd faced a mini boss, gone through a tiny little dungeon, watched all these cutscenes. For talking to this Magitech armor tank guy, I got sent back a long time. If I'd talked to Kefka, as I found out, that also, obviously initiates a fight. Like I said, it starts the boss battle. After the battle, once General Leo damages Kefka enough, Kefka also kills General Leo, except this time he kills him in a cutscene where General Leo is supposed to die. This is the canonical way that General Leo, is meant to bite the bucket, kick the bullet, things like that, And that's a little ridiculous to me, because literally the difference between General Leo dying to the tank or dying to Kefka is a difference of 3 tiles. So either he dies 3 tiles to the left or he dies 3 tiles to the right. And one death is a game over that makes you reset your game, and the other death is the correct way that the game is supposed to progress. And there's no indication that this is what's going to go down. It just happens. And if you, like me, talk to the wrong person first, then you just kind of get a middle finger. And that's not something I like. I do not like middle fingers. So yeah, that's just, another thing to put on the list about how weird Final Fantasy VI is, about how it's maybe not, the end-all, be-all, greatest Final Fantasy ever made that some people would lead you to believe. But I'll keep going, of course. This is frustrating, this is weird, but it's not so much that I'm going to quit the game or anything like that. I think I'm probably in it for the long haul at this point. I think I'm probably about 2/3 of the way through the game at this point. I think I'm 15 or 16 hours into the game, maybe 14, somewhere around there. So we'll see what's up next month or whatever. At the rate I'm going, I might actually be done with the game by Halloween. And that sounds funny, but at the rate I've been playing this game, that's probably about right. I started playing Final Fantasy VI, in February or March? So, I've been playing it for many months. It's taken me a long time to get where I am because of the nature of the way I play these games. I don't just sit around in my bedroom and play portable games. I play portable games in places where portable games make sense. So I'll keep going. I'll keep playing Final Fantasy VI. And I'll probably have more things to complain about next month, assuming I get to the World of Chaos or whatever it's called. But that'll probably be the end of this podcast for now. It is another long one because we ended up having a lot to talk about between, production stuff, Sonic Mania Plus, my cat getting sick, Final Fantasy VI, whatever. But I'll see you guys next month, and this will be my traditional sign-off where I don't actually know how to end the podcast. Bye!